calling on Singaporeans to have a Singapoladay. A major tourism campaign is underway to help local hotels and attractions.
A COVID-19 vaccine developed by Duke-NUS Medical School gets the go-ahead for clinical trials after showing very promising findings.
And taking a virtual look inside the Istana, this year's National Day open house is open to everyone. Good evening, you're watching The Big Story. I'm Olivia Quay.
And I'm Haryanto Diman. We're coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. Again, a reminder, subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you never miss a single episode.
Now, we know that more than 80 hotels in Singapore have been given the green light to open for staycations. Haryanto, can we expect you to, hop on that and you
Of course. I think it's a good option. Besides, not having the chance to travel overseas, I think it's a good opportunity to kind of just have a change of environment. And in fact, some of my friends, we are planning to have a staycation sometime soon.
Okay.
Yeah. What about yourself?
Perhaps, but I have 2 children at home, so we'll see whether that's feasible or not. Well, 3 agencies, including the Singapore Tourism Board, are hoping that Singaporeans will do just that, be a tourist in Singapore. Now, launching today, the Singapore Rediscovers campaign calls on residents to support local lifestyle and tourism businesses and explore hidden gems.
The $45 million effort is the largest of its kind, even bigger than the Step Out Singapore campaign after SARS in 2003 and the Boost campaign after the global financial crisis in 2009. The joint effort by STB, Enterprise Singapore and Sentosa Development Corporation brings together around 40 businesses offering promotions on attractions, tour packages and hotel stays.
Now, Singapore's tourism sector no doubt has taken a huge hit as a result of COVID-19. At a virtual tourism recovery dialogue today, Trade and Industry Minister Chan Chun Sing said the campaign is also an opportunity to set new health and service standards to provide assurance to locals and foreigners.
We can build on our reputation as a safe and trusted hub. And throughout all our surveys over the years, one of the reasons that people come to Singapore is because they see us as a safe place to live and play. They see us as having good health standards, good information sharing, and it allows them to have the peace of mind to bring their families here, to come here to enjoy what we can offer.
Mr. Chan also detailed medium-term plans for the tourism industry. Now, these include redesigning tourism products for niche market business travelers, rethinking the MICE industry model, as well as reimagining offerings to locals. In the long term, STB will aim to launch the request for proposal for the integrated tourism development in Jurong Lake District by the end of 2020. It's also exploring concepts for the redevelopment of Singapore Racecourse at Kranji as a leisure destination.
Overall, we are realistic that in the short term, there will be headwinds, and we will need to use this opportunity to reinvent some of our business model, to reskill some of our workers so that we can provide higher quality niche offerings as a start before we progressively resume mass market tourism offerings.
Joining us now to discuss this further is Correspondent Tiffany Fumiko Tay. Now, Tiffany, the campaign is focused on encouraging domestic consumption, but at the same time, during this bad economic climate, many Singaporeans are worried about retaining their jobs, while others are facing pay cuts. Now, even STB Chief Executive Keith Tan acknowledged in his speech that more job losses are inevitable in the coming months despite government support measures. Wouldn't the campaign then be counterproductive as people may be more conservative in spending?
Yeah, so Mr. Tan did acknowledge that we are in a recession, people are going to be spending less. And also there are significant constraints in that businesses mostly have limits on their capacity, right? So even for attractions, I think it's as low as 25%. And that really limits how much businesses can then discount their prices by and even stay viable in the long run. Those might be relaxed in the coming weeks, but to your point, Mr. Tan said the amount that locals spend is really not going to cover the shortfall in tourism spending. But this campaign is really necessary because unlike larger countries, we don't have a domestic tourism market where you can travel from state to state. So this is essentially, as he called it, trying to buy time for businesses to survive as long as possible until travel can resume. And he really stressed the point that if locals don't step up and support their favorite restaurants, their favorite attractions, then a lot of them might disappear in the coming months.
While STB is ramping up its efforts to boost the tourism sector here, as you mentioned, Tiffany, do you know if there are plans to help workers in the sector at risk of possibly being retrenched? And are there plans or retrenchments expected beyond the one announced by Resorts World Sentosa last week?
Yeah, so STB hasn't received any confirmed plans or further retrenchments beyond RWS's layoffs, but they have said that more are to be expected likely in the coming months, not just job losses, but business closures as well, given that the travel market is likely to be depressed for some time. So what they are doing is working with MOM, with E2I, the unions to make sure that when, tourism business signals that it might retrench workers, that they can lead to, place some of them in different jobs and also hopefully create some flexibility so that when the tourism market recovers, they can return to their previous jobs if they want to.
80 hotels here have been approved for staycations and are gearing up to reopen their doors to welcome guests. They're turning to travel-staffed locals to fill their rooms, but the usual perks that people enjoy, like a breakfast buffet spread, is not allowed, or access to common facilities like the swimming pool and gym is limited. Do you think these new restrictions will affect the take-up rate?
It's hard to say, right? But I think judging on what some of the hotels have been saying, the ones that are open, they've been getting a lot of inquiries, a lot of bookings for the coming long weekends. So I think yes, buffets may not be around for a while. Some hotels require you to book before using the pool or the gym, but they are trying to make up for some of that by offering some of their staycation deals, throwing in maybe spa packages and stuff into the mix to kind of make up for that. I think there's a lot of pent-up demand to basically go anywhere, right? Because Singaporeans can't travel likely for the rest of the year, and people have been cooped up for 2 months during the circuit breaker. So I think that's what STB is banking on as well with its campaign, that Singaporeans spent more than $34 billion in overseas travel last year. So they're hoping that people will spend just a small amount of that and channel that into local businesses instead.
Thank you so much, Tiffany, for coming on to the show. We were speaking to correspondent Tiffany Fumiko Tay.
Now, with overseas holidays not really an option for most people, it looks like this will be the year of the staycation.
Now, many hotels in Singapore have reopened their doors and are ready for guests to return. But as multimedia journalist Renee Po reports, some things are being done a different way.
Hotels in Singapore were able to reopen for staycations last week. At the 5-star Fullerton Hotel, rigorous cleanliness practices are key. It will come as no surprise that all guests undergo the new normals of temperature taking and completing a health declaration form before they check in. In their rooms, they will receive a care pack containing face masks, hand sanitizers, and antibacterial wet wipes. Hotel rooms are deep cleaned and sanitized with hospital-grade disinfectant, and each room is vacated for 24 hours before the next guest checks in. At Fullerton's restaurants, each guest is provided with an envelope to store their mask, as well as an antibacterial wet wipe to sanitize their hands before the meal is served. However, anyone still hoping for a buffet will have to continue hoping. While there is no buffet, the plated meals do feature many different cuisines from around the world. Over at Oakwood Premier AMTD Singapore, the Shenton Way establishment has at the time of recording already received over 200 bookings, mostly for the weekends and current school holidays. A roving mobile bar introduced last September to replace the traditional hotel club lounge has proven to be an ideal feature in the current climate. Guests can pair their cocktails with a selection of canapes, all prepared from a safe distance by the bartender. While facilities such as the pool and fitness center are open, Distancing measures mean a maximum of 5 people are allowed in the pool and 3 people in the fitness centre. This means that guests can't casually drop by and need to pre-register for their workouts and pool time. Special UV cleaning technology is used for housekeeping and disinfecting key cards, and the cleaning of points that are touched most, such as door handles, has been stepped up to every hour. For boutique hotel M Social at Robertson Quay, guests enjoy a contactless check-in and check-out process at staggered timings. This extends to the dining experience, where guests can scan a QR code to view the menu on their own devices. Tables are cleaned and sanitized in between meal periods, and the alfresco area has been revamped to take into account safe distancing. While not going into numbers, M Social says its 2 staycation packages, where guests can learn how to make their own cocktail or create their own perfume, have seen an encouraging take-up rate. Hotels must comply with safe management measures and seek approval from the Singapore Tourism Board before they are allowed to reopen. With the measures in place, it's not hard for guests to be able to put their minds at ease and truly enjoy themselves.
On to the latest COVID-19 numbers. The Health Ministry confirmed 310 new cases today, including 7 in the community. Of these, 3 are Singaporeans or permanent residents and 4 are work pass holders. There were also 6 imported cases.
The vast majority of the remaining cases are migrant workers living in dormitories. Today's count brings the total number of COVID-19 cases here to over 48,700. More details will be released later.
Now, a vaccine developed by Singapore's Duke-NUS Medical School and US pharmaceutical company Arcturus Therapeutics has received approval for clinical trials. That means the in-human trial for their Duke-NUS Covid-19 vaccine will be the first in Singapore.
Here to tell us more is the Deputy Director of the Emerging Infectious Diseases Program at Duke-NUS, Professor Ooi Eng Eong. Welcome, Prof, and congratulations on this milestone. Prof, Duke-NUS Covid-19 joins 24 other candidate vaccines worldwide that are undergoing clinical evaluation. How does this vaccine stand out from the rest?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, and thanks for having me. This vaccine is basically it's a genetic material of the virus. It's a small part of the virus, but it's that part which is important for the virus to get into our cells. And so because we present this genetic material to the body, and then the body will then make the part, that fragment of the virus, and so then our immune system would see it and recognize it. Which is, in a way, this is what many other companies are also targeting, right? So they just present it in different way. Some give the genetic material, others give the actual fragment of the virus itself. The unique thing about what we're doing with Arcturus is that this genetic material that we're putting in will replicate. What that means is 2 things. One is that you need to give much less material, genetic material to begin with, right? So given a manufacturing product, the yield, whatever that we can get from one manufacturing run, we can give it to more people because less of it is needed per person. The second thing about it that I think is really important is that that's what exactly the virus does, right? It pumps its genetic material into our body, and then our body then makes the rest of replicates the virus, and then that's how it grows and it perpetuates itself. Our immune system needs to recognize that process, that this is a virus, because it needs to trigger the right genes to be turned on and the right genes to be turned off, so that the quality of the immune response then is directed against a virus, not against something else. Right? So I think with these 2 processes, I think that's why we are quite excited about what we've seen, and we're eager to move forward into clinical trials.
We understand the first study will involve 108 healthy adult volunteers. Moving forward, what are the most immediate steps, and how long will the process take from this point that you're at right now to developing a safe and effective vaccine?
So the first part of the clinical trial is to make sure that the vaccine is safe. right? And it's well tolerated by people. What I mean by that is that, there'll be minimal side effects, and whatever side effects we get is just mild, and it won't cause us any inconvenience. So that's the phase 1 trial, the 108 people that will test this in. What we also want to do is, because COVID-19 affects the elderly, the older people a lot more severely than the younger adults. So we also want to start with young adults, but then move to the older age group. The reason for that is that we want to first of all make sure that the vaccine is safe in healthy people first, before we then move forward into the more vulnerable groups. This whole process will probably take about 3-4 months. It'll be before the end of the year that we can go into a much larger trial. So that phase, or known as phase 3, will be when we ask whether the vaccine will protect us against COVID-19. So the first part is to say is to ask the question: is the vaccine safe? The second part is, does it work? And that part takes much longer for obvious reasons, because you need to now vaccinate thousands of people to know whether it will work. But it also depends on how many COVID-19 cases we have in Singapore and possibly the other parts of the world as well. I don't think it'll be a problem, but that's always a variability that we have no control over. But a phase 1, we have control, and so that one we know 108 people will give us the answer that we need in about 3-4 months.
Right. Prof, as mentioned earlier, there are 25 candidate vaccines around the world, including yours. Is there some form of collaboration among groups, even if it's a race to find a COVID-19 vaccine?
I mean, in a way, information is being shared. So whichever company that have vaccine development effort that have gotten the right set of results, or at least mature enough, they will all publish it. And like we too will aim to do that. But we also working fairly independently, obviously, because there's intellectual property and all that involved. But I think that aside, I think there's real advantage in working independently. The reason is because we don't know a lot about this virus, right? It is still fairly new. It's in Singapore for 7 months, coming to 8 maybe in the world. Maybe China has seen it for about a month or 2 longer. But it's actually a very short amount of time, and we have to acknowledge that there's a lot of things we don't know about this virus. And so the more we can work at this independently, the better it is, because then we are not putting all our eggs in one basket.
Are there benefits then for Duke-NUS to be at an earlier stage of development compared to the others?
Right. So in a way, there are advantages, because the front runners have gone into early phase clinical trials. We can look at the results that they've gotten, and then we can that shapes our thinking as well as to how we should do our trials. I think one takeaway that I've come away with from the results that have come from other more advanced vaccines is that we can see what kind of results they have achieved in the clinical phase versus what we have seen in the preclinical phase. Because one of the big hurdles is this preclinical to clinical transition, right? So sometimes things look very rosy in the preclinical data in a lab where everything's very controlled. When you go into humans, then it's a completely different story.
Thank you very much for coming on the show, and of course, good luck in the whole process. That was Professor Ooi Eng Eong, Deputy Director of the Emerging Infectious Diseases Program at Duke-NUS Non-Medical School, along with a US pharmaceutical company, have just had their COVID-19 vaccine approved for clinical trials.
Also making local headlines, 8 people among a group of 18 who met up in a Compassville Crescent flat during the circuit breaker period were charged today with breaching COVID-19 restrictions. All intend to plead guilty. The couple who hosted the group and the other guests will be charged in court later this week.
Another 10 people were charged today, in this instance for allegedly failing to comply with safe distancing measures and gathering to consume alcohol. All are accused of committing the offences at Bio Crescent during Phase 2 of the economic reopening. Each person was handed 2 charges under the COVID-19 Temporary Measures Act and 1 charge under the Liquor Controlled Supply and Consumption Act. All 10 intend to plead guilty. They'll be back in court next month.
The National Day Istana Open House will be held online this year, with visitors getting a tour of rarely seen features like an air raid shelter in a cellar and a well located on the side of the Istana's main building. The hour-long event will be hosted on President Halimah Yacob's Facebook and Instagram platforms on August 2nd from 10 a.m. and it will be open to everyone.
Good evening, I'm Dylan Ang. Here are the global headlines. Malaysian authorities are considering implementing either a fine or jail time for those refusing to mask up once the use of face masks is made mandatory in public places. Health Director General Datuk Dr. Noor Hisham Abdullah said the growing number of COVID-19 infections is worrying as the number of daily cases hit double digits for the 3rd straight day on Tuesday. Riot police were seen across the Hong Kong town of Yuen Long on Tuesday to stamp out rallies marking the 1-year anniversary of an attack by government supporters. Officers used pepper spray to disperse small groups of protesters and reporters inside the mall. Hundreds were also detained and searched throughout the night, and police said at least 5 arrests were made. 13 hostages held on a bus in Ukraine were released unharmed after President Volodymyr Zelensky gave in to one of the hostage takers' demands that he promote an animal rights documentary. The hostage taker was armed with guns and a grenade when he took the bus passengers captive, sparking a 12-hour standoff with police. After speaking on the phone with the hostage taker, President Zelensky later posted a statement on Facebook calling on the public to watch the 2005 animal rights documentary Earthlings, narrated by actor Joaquin Phoenix. And those are what's making headlines around the world. It's back to you guys in the studio.
Well, thank you, Dylan. Well, those are our top stories for today. For more news and videos, visit straitstimes.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel by hitting the red button below.
Once again, I'm Haryanto Diman with Olivia Quay. Join us tomorrow for more stories on A Big Story.